Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Daily Debate. My name is Ahmed Nader and tonight we'll be focusing on the activities of the G20 as Egypt was participating in it and the main statements made during the participation of Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry during the G20 and the main role of the group of 20 major economies around the world to be facing the current economic conditions. One of the main statements made by Egypt, as well as the intention to be hosting a global center for grains, handling the current food crisis all over the world. But first of all, we'll be starting straight away with the main top stories from Sunday, and we will be starting straight away with the presidential activities of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, as the presidential spokesman Bassem Radi said that President al-Sisi held talks with Prime Minister Mostafa and the Minister of Finance and Education and Technical Education. He said that the meeting discussed developing the primary education. The presidential spokesman added that al-Sisi gave directives to focus on preparing the human cadres and developing teachers' capabilities. He said that al-Sisi also gave directives for the expansion of new specialized schools. And still with the presidential activities of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, but on the bilateral level between Egypt and China. As President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received on Sunday the Chinese Foreign Minister Ji Qiang. Attending the meeting was Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and the Chinese ambassador to Egypt. Presidential spokesman Bassem Radi said that al-Sisi welcomed the Chinese minister, asking him to convey his greetings to the Chinese President Xi Jinping, stressing the Egyptian keenness to continue cooperation with China. Meanwhile, the Chinese official conveyed the Chinese president's greeting to President al-Sisi, asserting China's keenness to continue developing the strategic relations with Egypt. Qiang expressed the Chinese appreciation for the Egyptian pivotal role as a pillar of stability in the Middle East region. He pointed out that China is supporting Egypt in the exerted efforts to achieve comprehensive development, security and stability, as well as fighting terrorism. And still with the bilateral relations between Egypt and China, as Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry held a joint press conference with the visiting Chinese Foreign Minister Ji Qiang in Cairo on Sunday. Speaking at the press conference, Shoukry lauded the role of the Chinese companies in implementing the developmental projects in Egypt. He said that the meetings with the Chinese top diplomat discussed the bilateral ties and the common interests. The top diplomat described the Egyptian-Chinese ties as historic and said both countries have civilizations that impacted the human history. Shoukry said that China is interested in continuing cooperation in the industrial and the technological fields. The foreign minister also welcomed cooperation with China in the field of tourism. He said the talks with the Chinese foreign minister discussed the regional issues, including the Palestinian cause. For his part, the Chinese foreign minister said that the talks witnessed the consensus on many files. He said Beijing comprehensively supports the developmental path in Egypt. The Chinese foreign minister expressed keenness on boosting cooperation with Cairo on all levels, especially the cultural, scientific, and the industrial fields. He also said the foreign interventions is one of the challenges the Middle East countries are currently facing. We return to the main topic of the daily debate for tonight and the first report of the episode for today, as well as Egypt is encouraging the G20 countries to be having a bigger role in fighting the world hunger and, of course, during the economic conditions that the whole world is facing. We'll be having the upcoming report, so stay tuned.
Egypt's Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry expressed Egypt's readiness to cooperate with the international community in order to host an international center for supply and storage of grains to face the global food crisis. This came in his speech via video conference in the Voice of the South summit meeting that was held under India's presidency of the G20. Shoukry's speech comes within the framework of the invitation extended to Egypt from India to participate as a guest in the G20 meetings. Shoukry began his speech by thanking the Indian presidency for inviting Egypt to participate in the activities of the G20 during its presidency, noting that challenges facing the countries of the South caused by the successive crises topped by the COVID-19 pandemic, food supply chain and food security crises, and climate change. He stressed the need to adopt a comprehensive approach to deal with these challenges and to reach common and effective solutions. He also underlined the importance of the G20 in providing the necessary impetus to reformulate the international economic system to effectively respond to the challenges facing the countries of the South. Shoukry also pledged Egypt's commitment to engage in the discussions and initiatives that would be put forward within the framework of the G20 to reach consensus on the current serious challenges. He called on the group to take the initiative in obligating development partners to provide the necessary support to the countries of the South to recover in the short term and deal with their development needs in the long term. Shoukry also reviewed the role played by Egypt in making strong and unprecedented commitments within the framework of the UN Climate Change Conference COP27 that was held in Sharm el-Sheikh in November. The Foreign Minister also stressed the importance of providing access to energy to all countries, saying that the energy transition will not be achieved without ensuring adequate financing and transferring technology to developing countries. Shoukry noted that Egypt launched the Global Renewable Hydrogen Forum during the climate conference, underlining that the trade opportunities that the forum can provide between developing and developed countries.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and I am honored to be having with me over the program for tonight Engineer Mostafa and Naggari, the chairman of the Grain Committee of the General Federation of Chambers of Commerce. Thank you very much for being with us tonight on
Thank you for the invitation.
Anytime. First of all, how do you see the participation of Egypt as a guest in the summit of the Voice of the South, of course, during the meetings of the G20 in general?
I think it is a good timing for Egypt to present its speech for the G20. So yes. Timing and to whom you are addressing this speech is a very important event, as we say.
Yes.
So first of all, what was the speech and who are the G20? Okay. Of course, as we know that G20 was formed in 1999,
yes.
And it was according to the crisis which happened in South Asia at that time. And the 20 members of this group is really the leading countries for the economy of the whole world.
Yes.
So we can see that there is USA, Russia, China, and then it comes 4 countries in Europe, UK, France, Italy, Germany, and then Argentina and Brazil from Latin America, and then it comes Australia and Canada as well.
Yes.
Indonesia, Japan, South Korea. If you look for this formulation of this country, they are really the leaders of the world in the economy and in the production as well. And of course, at the side of this G20, there is the IMF and also the National Bank, the International Bank,
Yes.
and the European Union as well. So you can see that, of course, everybody have to speak with this group who are responsible more and more, day by day, to promote for the trade and the economy of the other members. And that's why this is the G20, so they have a role, which I will tell you what is the role of the G20, and
Yes.
on the other side, the speech of Egypt, and thanks to the Indian presidency of this round, which they invited Egypt to be a guest speaker, as we say, and then we come to the speech itself. But before we come to the speech, we have to mention some figures, which is very important for everybody to know.
Yes.
By 2050, the population of the global will be about 9 billion inhabitants. And from today until 2050, we have to increase our food production by 80%, the whole world, to try to cover the demand.
Yes.
Aside to this, we have to focus on COP27, which Egypt have invited and hosted this very important event to speak about the climate change. And we have to mention that the round 27 is completely different than the previous rounds, because it came on a certain time that there was the pandemic of Corona, there was the crisis of the war between Russia and Ukraine, and then it came the problem of the supply chain all over the world. And really, it have affected each consumer in the whole world, not even in our area or in the south, or it was all over the world. So we have to know that Egypt is on the trade road, as we say.
Yes.
Always we are in a good location between the east and the west, and the south and the north, and the members of the G20 are spread all over the world. So Egypt is really a good hub, if we can say, for trade and the distribution and the storing of grains and strategic food commodities, as we say. Also, we have to announce that Egypt have launched the commodity stock exchange recently, and it's working successfully, even if it is domestically until this moment exaction, but at the end it will help a lot, because Egypt is a big consumer and it's a gate for Africa.
Egypt is at the center, as you mentioned,
Yes,
of everything, the center of the events.
Correct.
Of everything.
Correct.
To be having the storage facilities of grains here in Egypt, how important to be launching this idea at the G20 nowadays, and do you think it could be implemented as soon as possible? Because we did see the repercussions of having the war between Russia and Ukraine,
Correct.
specifically targeting grains.
let me tell you that Egypt have spent a lot to improve its infrastructure for the trade and for the industry for the last 6-7 years.
Yes.
So at the end, we are having more than 12 very successful and very economical ports, as we say.
Yes.
So we have few ports in the Red Sea, and we have other ports on the Mediterranean Sea, but it is always improving. So that's why we have always to focus on these big projects which Egypt is launching day by day, and also the roads. I mean, many people are talking about that we are spending a lot of money in the roads and so on, so on, so.
Yes.
No, we have to look to the map of distribution and consumption. As we know that Upper Egypt is always suffering from the supply chain, as we say, but at the end we have 3 ports are serving directly by roads from Safaga to Qana. Let us say it's only about 200 kilometers. So these ports can supply directly to the consumer in Upper Egypt, because before the people of Upper Egypt have to come by road to the north, to the north and get their commodities and go back.
Waste of time and energy.
Yes, it's a cost and energy and time and everything you can imagine. So having the good infrastructure for trade for Egypt is very important, and it will help because there is a link from the Red Sea ports to the north part of Egypt. As we say that, to save money and to save the cost of the Suez Canal tolls, you can only deliver your goods either to Adabiya, let us say,
yes,
and then by road you can go to Damietta or to Bahira, or to, so you can save a lot of money and you can distribute easily. So we have to look to this good supply chain. If we look globally, Egypt, as we say, it is in the center of the global, so it is easy for all the suppliers of the world to come and to store their commodities in Egypt. We have enough capacities. We have areas ready for that. It's only need, as we say, a mutual desire for this cooperation between the suppliers and for the importers or the traders.
Yes.
So we have to mention also a very important point that today Egypt is importing 1.2 million tons of wheat. This is the import. It's not the consumption, but
yes,
this is the imports which Egypt have to afford. And also we import about 200,000 tons of sugar. Thanks God we have about 95 sufficiency at this moment, but at the end this is considered to be a big market.
Over the month or over the year?
Months. I'm talking monthly, okay? We talk about the faba beans, about 50 to 55,000 tons monthly. If we talk about the edible oils,
yes,
about 150,000 tons of edible oil. And we produce just about 5% only out of this quantity. We need about 90,000 tons of beef every month, and about 180,000 tons of poultry, of chicken. You can imagine there is a big challenge, and what His Excellency Sameh Shukri have announced is really a solution for the problems of the South, and Egypt could be a hub to try to cover all the challenges which the South are facing, and he is asking the G20, who are the developing parties of the world, to help in developed part of the world. And this is a very important timing.
You have raised a very important point, which is the comparison of what we have in terms of what we could be having in the future, in terms of having infrastructure, new cities, a new capital, new roads, all of those things that we are building nowadays. And you've raised the important point that do we need this for the future, or do we need to be having more food to be exported to the other countries or to be imported from the other countries as well? What is the bigger priority for now? Are we just looking for the right now or for the future?
Egypt is really working in several channels, as we say, on the same time. So if I say that Egypt is a big importer of some commodities, but also we are one of the biggest exporters of fruits and vegetables in the world at the time being. And 3 days ago, the Ministry of Agriculture have announced that Egypt exported 6.4 million tons of vegetables and the fruits, and the revenue was about $3.3 billion. Which is another issue, because from our point of view, that if you have by easy equation and divide 3.3 by 6.4, so that means that each ton Egypt export is costing about, in average, $510, which is very little. So we are working on the other side to increase our exports by monitoring and focusing on high-value items of the fresh products. So we are working, and Egypt, this is the strategy of Egypt. We are not stopping exports. We are improving this sector, and you have 2 days ago, the Prime Minister, Dr. Mostafa have announced initiative for financing 2 sectors, which is industry and agriculture. So you can see that you are working on several fields. You are building your infrastructure. You are trying to attract your partners to store the commodities in Egypt to be as a hub, either for Egypt or for the South. And you are increasing your exports on the same time. This is the only solution to try to overcome the crisis which is surrounding the whole world. So Egypt is a very active part in the world according to the food safety and the food security.
Can the infrastructure that were built under the tenure of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in the past 7 or 8 years be helping us in terms of being a hub, as you mentioned, the center, Egypt, the center of events in terms of food security for the future?
I will just remind you with what happened when His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi launched the canal, the second branch of the canal, okay? And everybody was saying that it would not help, it would not do anything. But our experience as a traders and as a importers, that this have saved a lot of money for the consumer at the end, because it was only one road, so you either go out or in. You cannot try to activate the ports, because the pier and of each port, it costs a lot of money. So at the end, you know, we can talk a lot about these issues, but at the end it have saved a lot of time and a lot of money, because you pay this money for the ship owners at the end. So it is a foreign currency which you pay it for other partners, we can say, but the consumer will pay that. So every action have been taken in the infrastructure was for a reason. Maybe we say that nobody was predicting that there will be a war between Russia and Ukraine, and then the Federal Bank of USA will increase the rates so they will attract the dollars. This is a bad situation which affected Egypt and many other developing countries. But our plan was done really that you have to restructure your infrastructure from the beginning, and you have to increase and upgrade the efficiency and the value of your, as we say, assets of the country.
Does this mean that the plans that we are implementing in terms of the economic reform programs, the steps that we have taken in the past 7 or 8 years, the infrastructure that we have built, all these steps are for the future? We'll be seeing and reaping the fruits of these steps and those plans in the near future, maybe in the upcoming 10 to 15 years, not now?
I will just focus on one issue out of what you are saying is the agriculture. Okay, we have seen that for the last 3-4 days there is 4 big mega projects for the agriculture were launched. So
Yes.
one is the greenhouses, and one is new Toshka, which they call it Toshka al-Khair. It's completely different than the previous Toshka, completely different. And then Egypt Future project, and then Reef al-Masri. So at the end, you see that this is the plans for the future. It's not for our generation. You are always thinking about the coming generation. Maybe 2-3 decades will come, and they will say, well, our fathers or grandfathers, they didn't do something for the country. But everybody is working, and I have to say that the Agri-Bank, the Agriculture Bank of Egypt, which have a new reform at this stage,
Yes.
is giving initiative for the agriculture companies. And today morning I had a meeting with them, and we agreed to give also for the small farmers.
Yes.
They are going to finance 100% of the cost of each crop planting, with 5% interest rate, which is more and more trying to give the sign how the country is trying to help even the small farmers. And we are also having a program for the smart farming, which will help the small farmers to combine together in a cluster, so they are going to have a better chance to decrease the inputs of the pesticides, of the fertilizers, of the water as well, and try to increase the productivity. And all this is working very fast to try to stop the effect of the weather and the climate change, which, as we mentioned, that the agriculture and the food safety was a big paper presented by Egypt, especially because it was able to present that on behalf of the African continent as well.
Food security, yes, is a very important topic. It was discussed during the COP27. It was discussed nowadays during the Voice of the South Summit, in line with the meetings of the G20. How do you see the situation of food security here in Egypt, more specifically, as we did see the COVID-19 in the past couple of years, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict taking place in the past year? How did this affect the food security in Egypt, if ever affected, and how, on the other side, it affected the other countries, the other continents at the same time?
Everybody was affected. We cannot say that Egypt maybe was more active, and as we say, we didn't close or have a lockdown, as we mentioned. We have to remember, at the time of the pandemic, by 2020, early 2020, so some voices were asking the government not to lock down.
Yes.
And this have faced a lot of course, objections and so on. I have to always think of Engineer Hussein Sabur, Engineer Ali Isa. All of them were saying the best for the country to try to move with the pandemic and not to lock down. And thanks God that Prime Minister Mostafa Madbouli at that time, he gave the order that the ports will work 24 hours. All the authorities from the plant quarantine or the General Organization of Import and Export was working hardly. So we didn't find any lack of commodity inside the market of Egypt at all.
Yes.
What we are facing now is high prices, the increase of the prices of the commodities, and this is according to the lack of the foreign currency. We have to be clear, and that's why this invitation for our G20 partners to try to convince the leading developing countries to try to trade and to try to store. This will save a lot of money, and it will be always ready goods for us.
Despite the conflicts, despite the pandemics, whatever happens around the world.
We have been talking for the last 2 months about that there is a lot of commodities in the ports, but there is no currency to pay for.
Yes.
And who is paying the demurrage or the cost of the storage? It's the Egyptian consumer at the end. So if we succeed to try to get these goods in Egypt as a store for the suppliers, they will pay the storage, not us. And so we will benefit, and at the time we need this, we can pay and deliver it inside the country or give the service for other importing countries, and we can deliver, because Egypt is connected with a very good commitment and the trade agreements, which will give zero import duties, and always Egypt is trying to break all the barriers, the trade barriers between, European Union. We have a partnership with Africa. We have the continent agreement with Mercosur. We have an agreement with the Euro-Asian group. We have a commitment.
Yes.
With the Arab League, we have a commitment. So Egypt is always a part of any commitment which will give chances for countries to trade easily without any custom or any other barriers.
The invitation from India as the head or the president of the G20 meetings this time around for Egypt as a Mediterranean power, as an African power, as an Arab power as well. What does it say about the weight of Egypt economically, politically, in terms of food security in the continent, to be speaking through Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry at the G20 meetings for the Voice of the South Summit, and as well as the bilateral ties between Egypt and India? Today, Egypt and China as well. The Foreign Minister of China was here. He met with His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry. So the bilateral meetings between Egypt and Asia in general, the Asian powers to be represented in China and India, that's a big thing nowadays as well.
Let me tell you that from time to time I'm invited for the WTO, not meetings, but at the end, always in Egypt you have to focus on each decision taken by the WTO.
Yes.
WTO is the World Trade Organization, and it is gathering many countries, of course, and some of the countries are G20, and some of the countries are developing countries. So if we always focus on the situation of groups of countries in the WTO, so you always see that India and Egypt and Brazil and Argentina is always on the same side and the same vote, because we have the same problems, as we say, in India and Egypt, especially regarding the logistics and regarding the improving system, which the developing countries is always trying to implement it day by day.
Yes.
They want to improve the exaction of the trade and of this, and Egypt and India is trying to take times.
And we have big populations as well in Africa and
so
the Arab
the
world.
relation always between India and Egypt and Brazil and some developing countries is, if we say they are always on the same side. So the relation, I'm not astonished that India would invite Egypt because we have the same overlook on the international and the global trade. We have a sincere relation, of course. And at the end, trade between Egypt and India is increasing a lot for the last 3 years. So I think that India is also focusing that they are big producer of cereals and wheat and rice and sugar as well. So they are trying also to look for Egypt as a hub, because now everybody is looking for the short roads in trade. After, you know, we have seen the problem of the supply chain all over the world, everybody, even the industry, is not, the US is not anymore looking for industry in Asia. They wanted to use the area here to be closer. They are looking for the short tradeways, as we say.
The G20 meetings also tackled not just food security, but the future of energy as well, as was tackled during the COP27 meetings in Sharm el-Sheikh here in Egypt in the past year in November. How do you see the importance of transforming the way we are getting our energy sources nowadays? Because we did see what happened between Russia and Europe, Russia and the West, in terms of limiting the gas exports from Russia to all over the world, with the political conflicts between Russia and the West, or Russia and Ukraine. Do you think that we need new sources like the solar energy, like the green hydrogen that was tackled during the COP27?
Of course, Egypt have promoted for the green hydrogen initiative in this in COP27. But we have to say that now there is a must. It is not a problem of a war. There is a must, because we have to review and return it to November 2019, because the European Union have signed an agreement called the Green Agreement. And according to Green Agreement, it's a period until 2050 that there should be zero carbon emission in the world. And of course, if you don't follow that, so they will not trade with you, the European Union, which is the big buyer of the world at the moment. So we have all to follow that. So there was a program, and Egypt is aware, and we are always holding meetings to follow this agreement and to see how we have to adapt. So there is a must, if we say, to adapt yourself to the green energy. And if we look, huge number of companies in Egypt were established for the solar energy. Mainly they were in the beginning importing the solar panels from China and other countries, but there is good news that there is at least 3 big factories are now producing the solar panels even in Egypt.
Being manufactured here.
Yes, yes. So that's why Egypt is always, and Africa will benefit a lot, of course, because of the sun and so on. So I think this timing, it will be good for the gas, but the gas will end by 2040, and then it comes the solar energy from 2040 to 2050. And everybody have to follow that. So Egypt is also doing a good job in that.
Yes, Engineer Mostafa and Naggari, we will be heading to the second report of the daily debate for tonight, which comes from the Egyptian-Indian relations, as they recently celebrated 75 years of diplomatic ties. We will be having more details on this occasion in the upcoming report, so stay tuned.
Egypt and India have agreed on boosting their trade and cooperation in various fields as they celebrate this year the 75th anniversary of their diplomatic relations. The announcement was made in a joint press conference between Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri and his Indian counterpart in Cairo last October. Shukri hailed the leap in bilateral relations with India in line with the historic relations binding the two countries, saying that the trade between the two countries saw a 40% increase. Shukri said that there is a firm political will between the two sides on joint work to enhance the bilateral relations and coordinate on regional and international issues. For his part, the Indian Foreign Minister affirmed that Egypt's participation will add to the G20 meetings. He stressed his country's support to Egypt's host of COP27 and its efforts to ensure climate action and finance for developing countries. He also hailed the bilateral relations and political consultations between the two countries, affirming the importance of boosting bilateral trade. Investments of Indian companies operating in Egypt exceed $3 billion. Egypt and India cooperate in the fields of capacity building, expertise exchange, as well as the sectors of vaccine production and pharmaceutical industry.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and I'm honored to be having with me over the program for tonight Engineer Mostafa Naggari, the chairman of the Grain Committee of the General Federation of Chambers of Commerce. Engineer Mostafa Naggari, as we did see in the past report, Egypt and India, as you mentioned the first part of the episode, that they have a lot of similarities, a lot of points in common between both countries. What are the main fields of cooperation nowadays between the two big countries in Africa and in Asia?
Let me tell you that Egypt was at the 60s and the 70s was a very good supporter to India. Yes. So at that time Egypt was exporting a lot of commodities to India, and even Egyptian experts were in India to try to teach the Indian farmers how to plant rice, how to plant sugar cane and all these items. And now we see that, of course, life is changing. Egypt is in challenges for water, so we are trying to control our plantation of rice, and we are importing the balance between the production and the demand. So India is one of the main suppliers of rice to Egypt at the time being. Mm-hmm. Also, we see for the wheat. India is a big producer of wheat, and they used to have some quarantine problems regarding some diseases, but they have also, by the help between Egypt and India, they have stopped this kind of diseases, and Egypt accredited India as one of the accepted origins for wheat. Mm-hmm. And we have to review about 6-7 months that there was some parcels of wheat coming from India to Egypt. Mm-hmm. On the other side, Egypt is a big market as well for Egyptian exporters regarding onion, regarding citrus. So in the field of agriculture, there is always cooperation. And yes. I am also honored to be the chairman of the Rice Committee in the Agriculture Council, Export Council of Egypt. So I always focus on the usage of the byproducts of the rice, which is the rice straw and the rice husk. And India was also having the same model of this type of usages, because India produce 130 million ton of rice, which is a huge quantity.
Yes.
And they consume, of course, about 110 or 115, and they export about 15 million ton of rice. So you can imagine how big is the volume of the byproducts. So we were always in discussion to exchange views about the industry of the byproducts, because at the end we have seen the crisis of the animal feed problem all over the world.
Yes.
And the usage of the byproducts of the agriculture have solved a lot of problems of that. So discussions also was taking place regarding the usage of the byproducts. In the industrial section, we have to look for the, as we say, industrial engineering products. So Egypt and India also is having a great cooperation in this field regarding the motor vehicles, the tractors, and you can see that there is a cooperation between India's companies to try to come and cooperate in car factories in Egypt as well. So in IT sector also is very active. The cooperation
Especially
in the
for
IT,
India.
Yes, it is very important. Even for Egypt, Egypt also is having a good record for that, and the IT department in Egypt, sector in Egypt, is very improving.
Yes.
So there is always a cooperation in that. We have always to look that there is, as we say, a similarity in the different ways, even in the culture as well. Okay, Egypt is importing a lot of beef also from India.
Yes.
Okay, so it is, India is a continent at the end. It's not a country. It have different civilizations and several ways of life.
More than a
but
billion
at the
people.
end, they have a really nice democratic system which is gathering them, and you can benefit from India a lot. And I think India is our partner to go to Africa.
To Africa?
To Africa, yes, because you know,
Are we the gate to Africa for India?
We are a partner with Indians to go to Africa together, because India have been to Africa before. There is a historical relation for the Indians, especially in the east coast of Africa. And the origin of some population in Africa are Indians. So they have been there for many years. And Egypt also is having a good political influence since years and years. And all generations of the Africans, they still remember the leading role of Egypt at that time. So I think we can be as a partner for Africa together.
Yes, Engineer Mostafa Naggari, the chairman of the Grain Committee of the General Federation of the Chambers of Commerce. Thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate.
Thank you.
And this brings us to the end of the Daily Debate for tonight. I will be leaving you, however, with the main activities of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in the past week. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi attends the National Alliance Conference for Civil Development Work. The official spokesperson for the presidency noted that the National Alliance Conference for Civil Development Work is considered a cornerstone in the state's development work process and a support to the system of social solidarity through the civil development works integration with the efforts of the government and the private sector. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi instructs the government to offer a rewarding price to farmers for the supply of wheat crop so as to be an economic return. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi follows the upgrading of Egypt's agricultural export system. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi gives instructions to intensify efforts to promote the civil aviation sector within the general framework of bettering the state's management of its resources and capabilities and optimizing investment on its revenues to the maximum economic limit. President el-Sisi inspects the comprehensive development work of Al Mu'attam Plateau area. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi follows up on the activities and contributions of the Long Live Egypt Fund. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi follows up the executive state for the development of Sinai.